Hello everyone. Today we are going to tackle about the elements and levels of communication. What are the elements and levels of communication? So what are the elements and levels of communication? The first element of communication is the message. The message is the meaning produced by the source for the receiver or audience. When you speak to a person, your message may be the words you choose that will convey your meaning. But that is just the beginning. The words are about together with grammar and organization. You may choose to save your most important point for last. The message also consists of the way you say it. In a speech, with your tone of voice, your body, language, and your appearance. And in a report, with your writing style, punctuation, and the heading and formatting you choose. Next is the sender and receiver. So what is the sender and what is the receiver? Well, the communication process begins with the sender, who is also called the communicator or source. The sender has some kind of information, a command, request, question, or idea that he or she wants to present to others. For that message to be received, the sender must first encode the message in a form that can be understood, such as by the use of a common language or industry jargon, and then transmit it. The person to whom a message is directed is called the receiver or the interpreter. To comprehend the information from the sender, the receiver must first be able to receive the sender's information and then decode or interpret. Next is the channel, also called as medium, is the means by which a message is transmitted. Text messages, for example, are transmitted through the medium of cell phone. Next is feedback. The communication process reaches its final point when the message has been successfully transmitted, received, and understood. The receiver in turn responds to the sender, indicating comprehension. Feedback may be direct, such as a written or verbal response, or it may take the form of an act or deed in response. The communication process isn't always so simple or smooth. The communication process isn't always so simple or smooth. These elements can affect how information is transmitted, received, and interpreted. Context is the setting and situation in which communication takes place. Context can have an impact on the successful exchange of information. It may have a physical, social, or cultural aspect to it. In a private conversation with a trusted friend, you would share more personal information or details about your weekend or vacation, for example, than in a conversation with a work colleague or in a meeting. Next is noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message being sent, received, or understood. It can be as literal as static over a phone or a radio, or as historic as misinterpreting a local custom. Noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message. Noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message being sent, received, or understood. It can be as literal as static over a phone line or radio, or as esoteric as misinterpreting a local custom. Noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message being sent, received, or understood. Can be as literal as static over a phone line or radio, or as esoteric as misinterpreting a local costume. Noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message being sent, received, or understood. It can be as literal as static over a phone line or radio, or as esoteric as misinterpreting a local custom. So these are the levels of communication. So we are going to tackle about the levels of communication, which would be
So,
presented by Kyle.
so there are types of level of communication, and this is intrapersonal communication. Can be defined as communication with oneself, and that may include self-talk, acts of imagination and visualization, and even recall a memory. It can be useful to envision intrapersonal communication occurring in the mind of the individual in a model which contains a sender, receiver, and feedback loop. And the second is interpersonal communication. This is an exchange of information between two or more people. It is also an area of research that seeks to understand how humans use verbal and nonverbal cues to accomplish a number of personal and relation goals. And the third one is group communication. Occurs when three or more people communicate to achieve a shared goal. It may also be defined as the exchange of information with those who are alike culturally, linguistically, and geographically. These messages, whether verbal or non-verbal, are important to groups because it is through the exchange of messages that group members participate, maintain maintain its message to group identity, determine goals, and motivate and participation, and do the many things that keep the group intact. So, Bent will discuss other levels of communication.
Public communication. Public communication is a one-to-many form of communication wherein a single speaker addresses a large audience. Communication is a one-to-many form of communication wherein a single speaker addresses a large audience. Public communication has several characteristics that make it a unique communication context, usually prompted by important events or issues. Public messages are constructed with more care that are most interpersonal messages. Audiences are large and sometimes quite heterogeneous. The speaker is physically distanced from the audience. Public communication takes place in the public sphere when our concern is to communicate as members of a larger community and our topic is of interest to many where we are in the public sphere. Mass communication is a process in which a person, group of people, or an person, group of, of people, or an organization sends a message through a channel of communication to a large group of anonymous and heterogeneous people and organizations. You can think of a large group of anonymous and heterogeneous people as either the general public or segment of the general public. Channels of communication include broadcast television, radio, social media, and print. The sender of the message is usually a professional communicator that often represents an organization Mass communication is an expensive process. Unlike interpersonal communication, feedback for mass communication is usually slow and indirect. Last, mediated communication or CMC is an umbrella term that encompasses various forms of human communication through network computers which can be synchronous or asynchronous and involve one to many or many to many exchanges of text, audio, or video messages. CMC examples include email, network communication, instant messaging, text messaging, hypertext, distance learning, internet forums, Usenet, Usenet news groups, bulletin boards, online shopping, distribution list, and video conferencing. Computer mediated communication breaks down geographical barriers to communication, enabling collaboration through communication over distance. People can exchange, store, edit, broadcast, and copy any written document. They can send data and messages instantaneously, easily at low cost and over long distances. Kigits na lang ako.
Sige, sige.
So, in summary, the communication process involves understanding, sharing, and meaning, and it consists of essential elements such as the message, sender and receiver, channel or medium, feedback, context, and noise. There are also levels of communication which are intrapersonal, interpersonal, group, public, mass, and computer mediated. That would be all. Thank you.